Welcome, everyone, to TNT Live, where we will be discussing, are you allowed or are you crazy if you call Justin Trudeau a dictator? As you know, Justin Trudeau is the most efficient leader in the entire world. He is great, and I will put on a lot of leather outfits, and I will march over to Alberta to tell Wyatt Claypool that there's nothing wrong with the Trudeau government. It is totally right about everything. Now, show us your papers. This will be the catalyst for this was a Conservative MP, Rachel Thomas, didn't even call Justin Trudeau a dictator, as many Liberal MPs called Stephen Harper, but she basically pointed out that lots of people are calling Trudeau a dictator, and this is indicative of something that is wrong in the country. So Wyatt, you wrote the article on this today. So what is your general impression of how this one's been played out?
Well, and there's, of course, the Liberal MPs criticizing Rachel Thomas from Lethbridge. She's a fairly decent MP considering the usual caliber you get inside the Conservative Party. But, of course, the Liberals are going to take her out of context, say she's calling Trudeau a dictator and whatnot. No, that's not really the most interesting thing. Of course, Mark, whatever his name is, something terrible Toronto guy. Mark, of course, he's going to... Yeah. Of course, he's going to say terrible things. Of course, he's going to lie and openly just slander whoever says something bad about Justin Trudeau. But the more interesting thing in my mind is just how quickly the legacy media just dropped the thin veil of objectivity to go out and just slander MP Thomas, because she was pretty much just saying a lot of people called Justin Trudeau a dictator. And she was pretty clear that she's not calling him a literal dictator. And of course, it's just hyperbole. People say things. People aren't going to sit there for 5 minutes and explain in what way Justin Trudeau has authoritarian tendencies and who he's praised in the past and the sorts of ways he walks on the charter and whatnot. She's just saying that your actions have made people literally call you a dictator, and that's a problem, and that's the point she's making. But the legacy media ran with the whole, she's calling Justin Trudeau a dictator. One, she didn't. And two, why are you writing tons and tons of articles going after someone for just making an opinion that's kind of widely held among conservative Canadians known? They're acting as if it's controversial to even mention this, and even the articles just talking about it like a news story, just here's what happened. The entire thing was about how she's controversial. She's a terrible person. The Global News' article on her literally just went after her halfway through because she said that the way the COVID-19 deaths were counted were inaccurate, and they were not correcting for the fact that certain comorbidities guaranteed someone was going to die regardless if they had COVID-19 or not. And I don't know, I guess it's just terrible. It's objective news in the legacy media's opinion that Rachel Thomas is bad, and that's I think the more gross part. Not that any of us in chat here watching this show were under the impression that CTV News or CBC was objective, but I think this is a great
Don't you dare slander the CBC around me. It's my job.
I think Rosemary Barton was one of the first people to come out and say, I can't believe someone like this is even allowed in Parliament, or whatever she said. But I think
we must kick everyone out of the Parliament who criticizes the leader. And if we do not completely destroy anyone who disagrees with us, then it is a dictatorship. This is how it goes. Yeah, basically CBC 101.
Yeah, but I think this is one of those instances where people who are still not aware that the media is extremely biased should be made to know that this is not how a normal news station operates. And I think a lot of people just don't understand what objectivity is anymore. Just having middle of the road liberal opinions is what is considered objective, even though this is a flat out bodyguard jump in front of a bullet for Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's like that we make that point all the time. Is the greatest way that fake news is spread in the Canadian media is false objectivity or false neutrality. Is pretending that center left is neutral. So when you bring on someone who's like very left wing, you're like, oh, this is center left, and we're the neutral. And then somehow Andrew Coyne ends up being a right wing person in all this. So it creates this false neutrality that when you get some actual right wing opinions, you can paint them as completely beyond the pale. Before we continue, if you guys don't mind liking and sharing the video, it really helps us out. All the buttons you push will literally save you from the deep state. There is no way to fight the deep state without liking or sharing the video. Zero way. Klaus Schwab will be at your house unless you like the video right now. He will sniff your kids with Joe Biden. Just how it works. Anyways, let's break down on what are the ways that you can reasonably call Justin Trudeau a dictator. So I'm going to go a bit off the standard what you think we're going to start with all the COVID-19 stuff and all the Emergency Act stuff, which is still pretty huge and a major catalyst for it. But prior to that, and I've been saying for years, and I think you've agreed, that Justin Trudeau has the impulses of an authoritarian and is, pretty distinctly aimed to centralize control. The biggest thing in his dictatorial push was actually the SNC-Lavalin scandal. This was when he really became, an authoritarian in my view, because Canada doesn't really have a balance of powers like America does that we're pretty, used to. So in America, a lot of people in Canada probably know the American system a lot better than Canadian, right? You have three different branches. You have the executive, the president, Biden, or whoever is pulling those strings and flapping his pretty clearly dead mouth. Then you have Congress, the legislative, the Congress, and the House, and then you have the judiciary, the Supreme Court. So in Canada, the Prime Minister is, also the head of one of the legislative branches. Like the Prime Minister can whip the legislature in his thing. So it's like if Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi had the powers combined into the same person. And again, if you're only prime minister if you control the majority in the House. So it's not like Pelosi when she was a minority leader. So you have the Canadian Senate, which does nothing. The American Senate is a real thing. The Canadian Senate is a bunch of unelected, useless nothings. So as I said, this might as well be the Canadian Senate. It would do the exact same thing. So it really just leaves one branch to counterbalance the powers of the prime minister, and that's the judiciary. So Stephen Harper, when he was still in, saw the problem here, and he started up like an independent judiciary that would further separate the powers between the prime minister's office and the court system. Well, the SNC-Lavalin scandal is Justin Trudeau's friends and donors to the Trudeau Foundation, people who were fined because they gave too much to the Liberal Party and then gave excess amounts to the Trudeau Foundation because they couldn't funnel enough money to the Liberal Party. SNC-Lavalin lobbied Justin Trudeau personally. Well, they also lobbied Harper, but Harper said no. They lobbied personally to get an exemption from the fines the criminal penalties they're going to face, felonies, for what they did in Libya around Gaddafi times. And if they had gotten those, been guilty of that, well, then they couldn't get government contracts for the next 10 years. Now, despite this, they're still getting government contracts because Justin Trudeau. But the real thing is so Justin Trudeau created a new law to help out a major corporation that lobbied him, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, to get SNC-Lavalin out of trouble and still be able to hand them your taxpayer dollars. Well, when the independent prosecutor found that they didn't qualify for this thing, right, he started to put pressure on Jody Wilson-Raybould, the current justice minister, to override the independent judiciary. Well, this is the complete breakdown of all the balances of power. This is a man who is trying to centralize all the powers in Canada into the prime minister's office. That is dictatorial. That's authoritarianism. That's totalitarian. Like, that is the major, major thing. And that's why it always drove me crazy when Andrew Scheer was going around saying he's racist and he's sexist because he fired and didn't listen to an Indigenous woman. How do you believe? The point wasn't that she was Indigenous. The point was he's becoming a dictator. Like, of course they could not. The Conservative Party is so friggin' useless on this thing. Couldn't talk about the actual issue. Had to leave it up to me. The media covered for him, of course. But this is the real start and the real coming out party of Justin Trudeau aspiring dictator. It was SNC-Lavalin. And people really do underestimate just how bad of a scandal that was. And since then, it's only gotten worse with the media censorship stuff, which we can go into more. But that was the start of the dictator stuff. And I guess you can make the argument for all the more recent stuff as I avoid a rant on.
Well, yeah, of course. And like everyone knows the types of things that Justin Trudeau was and even still is doing when it comes to COVID-19 policy, him having the police crack down and sort of working in conjunction with Doug Ford, having the police crack down on the freedom protesters in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy, the freezing of bank accounts, the invocation of the Emergencies Act without an actual emergency. Everyone knows all about that stuff. And whenever someone calls him a dictator, they're not saying he's like Mao or like he's like Pinochet throwing people out of a helicopter and whatnot. Like, of course, no one's accusing him of that.
They weren't people; they were communists.
Yeah, never mind.
Just kidding. But
it's sort of one of those situations where we all understand that Xi Jinping is a dictator, but if you move Xi Jinping from China to Canada, where there's more restrictions on power, Xi Jinping would probably act like Justin Trudeau. He acts as authoritarian as the system allows him to act. And I think when conservatives call him a dictator, they're identifying the fact that this guy, without almost hesitation, invokes the Emergencies Act, and he's the kind of guy who reluctantly rescinds it. He always is reluctant to do something that expands freedom. He's never reluctant when it comes to restricting it. He's always pushing for to restrict free speech and whatnot. And because the Canadian Charter at least has some power, he usually can't do it. Whereas if he was in China, you would have no barriers. And of course, he would probably be acting more like Xi Jinping, who he's praised the administration of in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll leave this question to the chat. But in 2015, when he was first running for office, here's a quiz. What did Justin Trudeau, quote, admire about the Chinese government? First person to put it in the chat will get a reward. So yeah, it's a great point of, yeah, you can't just be a dictator right off the bat when you take over Canada in 2015. You can't just say, you know what, I declare everyone is now trans, taxation is 100%, and and now everyone's forced to carry me around on a falcon and feed me grapes. You can't just start there. All right, Donna, the basic dictatorship. You win a spot in the gulag. Straight to the gulag for you. You get a one-stop trip to the gulag.
You get a free copy. You get a free copy of The Great Reset.
And a free copy of The Great Reset. You get the very, very, very rare Klaus Schwab erotic calendar. Most people get the regular calendar in the crazy robe. You get the Klaus Schwab erotic calendar for 2022. Congratulations. We already know where you live because you downloaded the COVID tracking app. And if you didn't, we downloaded it for you. So it will be coming anytime now.
I always love that stupid. No one talks about Klaus Schwab wearing the weird outfit enough. He legitimately just looks like he's like a Ninja Turtle or something. He's my favorite Ninja Turtle. That's why I wanted to say, really.
The evil Ninja Turtle. Yeah. So you have these stuff where, I mean, yes, he can't be a dictator on day one because he can't just come in there kicking the door. But this is how things happen. Like if you talk to friends you have in Venezuela, it was a 10-year process of them eroding, the freedoms and going down the same thing and instituting policies and then nationalizing under the concept of, whether the environment or to protect the people or blah, 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 whatever the reason is. But Canada is a much less free country in 2022 than it was in 2015. And yeah, he literally invoked the Emergencies Act on a phony emergency. The FinTrack deputy director said, there was no terrorism, there was no money laundering. All of this is BS. There was no, but it hasn't stopped them. And he still has his propagandists in the media taking, experts. And I think Andy Lee's done a great job of exposing who all these experts are. So can we just take a moment and pause and appreciate that Andy Lee's back on Twitter for now. But Andy is doing a great job basically exposing where like all these experts are basically old liberal ministers or Justin Trudeau's close personal friends. And they're coming out with no evidence and saying, oh, yes, it was a security threat. And then the media is reporting on the experts. Don't worry. Expert Bernie Farber will be in charge of internet censorship. And we're going on. So, yes, he's putting out bills like Bill C-11, which will censor the internet. And then when his current heritage minister, I think Pablo Rodriguez is now heritage minister, is asked about is he concerned that increasing internet censorship will limit freedom of speech? Well, he has ministers getting up there and saying, well, no, we're going to censor the internet. It's actually going to increase free speech. So we're going to increase the speech laws, make it harder to say things, and that's going to make free speech even freer, right? So it's Orwellian to the T, and we have a media that's been bought and paid for that is not going after him on any of this because, yeah, there might be a few things here or there in the National Post once in a fortnight or so, but en masse, there is no coordinated.
It's always when things reach critical mass. It's like how you would see certain conservative, quote unquote, media publications criticizing Aaron O'Toole only when he did something so egregious that they were basically forced to call him out. And that's sort of the same way it works for Justin Trudeau with the legacy media. They won't really criticize him unless it gets so egregious that they have to, or it'd be too obvious that they're sort of in his pocket. But it will be one article and then another article about how it's not that bad, and then another article about, well, we should just forget it. But I just wanted to quickly go back to the situation with Rachel Thomas, MP of Lethbridge, who was saying that many Canadians view Trudeau as a dictator, and was sort of like set off the media because, I can't believe you said that. I love the tweet that sort of like initiated this whole like controversy, if you can call it, from Stephen Chase from the Globe and Mail. I love the stupid thing he puts out. He says, worth noting, Conservative MP Rachel Thomas on Monday in the House of Commons said, many Canadians hold the view that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fits the definition of a dictator. She did not cite a poll. And it's that last part that drives me up a wall. It makes me want to do target practice on my own head. It's like, whenever I would love to see the big series of tweets from back in the day when Stephen Chase is saying, well, you can't call like Andrew Scheer a bigot. You can't call him homophobic. Oh, where's the poll that shows that people think he's like that? Because I guarantee you, Liberals have said many Canadians think you're X to a Conservative, and Stephen Chase didn't start setting his hair on fire because they didn't have Ipsos conduct a $10,000 poll to see if they were right or not. Like, all you need is Facebook or Twitter. Blackface Hitler literally trends every like other week now in Canada. I'm pretty sure there's a constituency of people who think he's a dictator in some form or another.
Viva Fry ran a Twitter poll. Like, Viva Fry ran a Twitter poll. He got like 26,000 results, and 81% said he fit the definition of dictator. Now, does that mean 81% of Canadians? No, because Viva Fry has a right-wing audience, and that, they would see that, they would retweet it, and then that. The Twitter polls are essentially, questions to the echo chamber. I mean, we know they are. Like, that's why sometimes when I run Twitter polls, like, they're meant as jokes, because it's not like I'm really trying. And like, the only Twitter polls that are somewhat legitimate is like when you're asking a question to the conservative base as a conservative person about how they feel about
what you would call a push poll. The whole point is that one side or another can hijack it, and it's like whenever CTV News puts out a poll or some other publication on their website, and it says, well, how many of you agree with keeping lockdowns in place forever? And all the sort of like conservative people, PPC people jump on it and then absolutely destroy the poll. And it's like 98% against it. It's a push poll. And what push polls do is they reflect momentum in society for something that and what it shows is there's a very keen segment of people who are very much against it. And the fact that, someone on the other side didn't then use the poll and push back the the yes side, like, yes, we want lockdown all the time, means that there's probably not a big constituency of people demanding lockdown stay in place forever. That's what you can kind of indicate with Twitter polls and whatnot. But yeah, it's not terribly useful, but it shows that there's a lot of people out there. And the fact that Viva Fry was able to get 26,000 people to vote on that poll, and I think it's even still up, demonstrates that it doesn't matter if it's like, oh, it's a Twitter poll. The fact you got 26,000 people to vote on it says something.
Yeah, and even if you say, like, let's cut the numbers, say half of those people aren't Canadian, well, there you have 10,000 Canadians who say he's a dictator. And, and that's just the ones on Twitter, active. But again, not this to say that Canada is now a dictatorship. It is to say, though, that a lot of Canadians see the road we're taking and see it leads towards a totalitarian dictatorship.
It's his character. He has the character of a dictator, not that he has the tools at his disposal that allow him to be that. But like,
he's a dictator without a dictatorship.
The fact that you've never shied away from praising people like Fidel Castro and Xi Jinping says something. And like, if a conservative even said something about someone who is considered a little bit too far right, they would immediately be called a racist and like a sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or something like that right away, even if it had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, Putin's a dictator, and like, yeah, you're right. Anyone on the political right side of the spectrum who has any affinity for Putin these days would be called a dictator. And we let that go because, you're praising a dictator. That means you side with the dictatorship. Well, for some reason that's never put on anyone with a Che Guevara shirt, a Fidel Castro love thing. You can praise, terrorist dictatorships like Hamas and Hezbollah. Although Hezbollah doesn't really have the power to take.
In my department in university, I'm basically done it, so I'm just going to say I have the degree now. When I was in policy studies, in the policy studies student sort of like lounge area that you could sit in, there was literally posters celebrating Mao, like someone who literally by the numbers killed more people in the 20th century than anyone. And you can make funny posters about him saying, and it's like, welcome to the party, and it has a bunch of communist people like dancing at a rave or something.
Yeah, I know that poster. That's a classic university poster. And that one's a bit more sarcastic, you can say. You're saying, I just put up the Klaus Che Guevara thing. Here's a question in the chat. Here's one of the funniest things. I think Wyatt and I have talked about this. I'm not sure if we talked about it on stream or like just on the phone one day. But how many modern leftists would Che Guevara have killed if he comes back? Like, how many people wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt these days, if Che Guevara comes back to life, would put a bullet in their head? A good amount. Like
I'm not sure if these people even realize that like Che Guevara was like deeply racist. They'll always sort of dance around it, and they'll say, "Well,
hated gays, hated gays,
like blacks. Literally
hated gays and blacks."
And it's actually kind of funny because he hated them for like oddly different reasons. So of course he hates gays because like gay and we can't have that in society at all. But then he hated black people because he hated religious people. And the perception in Cuba was that black people were more religious. So why not just open fire if they're not an open communist? And that was it. That's how gross of a person he was. But no. If you confront someone who's wearing a t-shirt about it, it's justifiable. Somehow they say
America. He's America. America's bad. And like America made him kill all those gay people. Because America's homophobic. That's why Che Guevara killed all, those gay people, because America is a white supremacist country. He had to kill all the gays and blacks in Cuba. So that's, that's where it is. So you have Justin Trudeau, who has openly praised the basic dictatorship of China. And I think it is important to just go back over the last few months and we hit the trucker convoy, because another thing that is fascinating, I'll point out, with Bill 100 in Ontario. We now live in a world. If I had told anyone in Ontario in 2018, during the election of Doug Ford, that there would be a scenario where Doug Ford is trying to institute permanent emergency policing powers, and the only one standing against him is the right wing, and like
there's actually the Green Party.
Oh, the Green Party is against him.
Yeah, the Shriner actually voted against it.
Okay,
so give him credit. He's like a libertarian green leader.
Okay, fair enough. So the other people standing against him would be like the conservative base and a Green Party MP. No one would believe me. I wouldn't believe me. That's crazy talk. Like, what would have to happen for that to be true? Because if he had called for emergency policing powers because the commies were just running around Toronto, burning everything down for Black Lives Matter, you go, all right, I can see it, and but there's almost no scenario I would able to think of, because even if Black Lives Matter and Antifa were taking hostages on the streets of Toronto and public executions every night broadcasted around the internet, Doug Ford would face screams and outcry trying to institute emergency powers from the media. If he tried to institute emergency powers when every night Antifa was executing people on the streets of Toronto, there's no way. Okay, by the way, thank you.
Oh, and we know that people would be mad if he cracked down on Antifa, because even in Portland, after an Antifa member went and just shot someone from like an American Patriots group, it wasn't even like the Proud Boys, which they're not great, but they're not exactly like terrorists either. But I guess they are by law.
They're in Canada.
But they went after it was like Patriot Prayer, which is just like an activist protest group. It's not like they're not violent in any significant way other than they might defend themselves. Like an Antifa member went and shot that guy, one of those people, in cold blood, and the mayor of the city still received criticism for trying to break up the nightly protests by Antifa, where they're like burning down buildings and like trying to kill people. Like the Canadian, I believe Canadian journalists were even attacking them. Or even attacking Trump for saying that it needs to stop. It's kind of ridiculous how, and this is this whole Stephen Chase thing again about where's your pull. But every single time a right winger does something that's even tinged with a little bit of like populism or a little bit of a hard-edged sort of piece, a little bit of pizzazz, immediately you're Hitler. But as soon as if someone like Justin Trudeau is doing something where he's like freezing your bank accounts and police are like cracking skulls and whatnot, and you're like, this guy's like blackface Hitler, they're like, well, what did Hitler actually do? And then they started trying to over intellectualize the whole thing until we're like nowhere. Like, what everyone understands that the meaning of words is not always literal, but as soon as you're criticizing someone on the left, like they break out the thesauruses and dictionaries to make sure that what you're saying is completely 100% accurate, and even then they'll still argue it.
Yeah, and so so they froze the bank accounts of people who they felt were organizing the trucker protest. They arrested, Tamara Lich, Chris Barber, Pat King, Freedom George, and now they're arresting Randy Hillier, which is beyond absurd. Like, Randy Hillier is an MPP, and we've criticized Randy Hillier, but saying stupid things isn't illegal. Some Reddit, and I saw this one insane Twitter thread from this woman, Carmen Dessa. I believe she was this lawyer who was at the freedom protest at least, and just taking stuff there. But the case she made against Randy Hillier was insane. She showed one video of Randy Hillier saying this Sunday the PPC was giving away free pancakes. And this was her legal case as a lawyer against Randy Hillier, is incitement to free pancakes. What? Come on. She didn't even show the clip of Randy Hillier trying to take down the barricade is him doing it. There
was absolutely moments you could argue that Randy Hillier was being deliberately disruptive, but it was usually in favor of the government that he was doing things that was disruptive, because he kind of invited in the police in a couple of instances. And the funny thing is that I'm not just because he gets arrested going to back away from the fact that he very much seems like a Doug Ford political asset, but if anything, this demonstrates why you can't reform the PC party internally. No good deed or no favor to the Doug Ford PCs will go unpunished. They will, despite the fact that they very obviously were cutting deals with Randy Hillier to give him extra funding and whatnot, and money into his independent riding association, they still have to throw him under the bus because they need to somehow ruin the Freedom Convoy, even though he was kind of a Doug Ford political ally in the background.
Well,
and it's still wrong to arrest him, of course. I'm always on that train. Yeah.
Yeah. Why you're on that train? So to go on the Doug Ford thing, it's amazing how they will do anything for the narrative. So you've seen it. It's not even it's not fair to you could still make the case that yes, they're unfair to conservatives. But if conservatives completely throw themselves under the bus, debase themselves, and then become liberals and then help out the movement, they can get, some media thing, because the media is still angry at Doug Ford. There's some COVID crazies who are Doug Ford took away the mask mandates. He wants everyone dead. And you have the blue checkmark doctors going insane, and lighting themselves on fire. So there still is a bunch of insane people who are still attacking Doug Ford for being conservative somehow. But you notice in the mainstream media, Toronto Star, I think he's sort of stabbed enough of the Conservative Party in the back. He's destroyed the party well enough that he's sort of earned some favor. And I saw this cartoon in the Toronto Star, which was basically saying what we were saying about it was showing Doug Ford holding hands with Justin Trudeau, skipping around into the sunset in a sad Jagmeet, going, well, I guess we're in an open relationship or something. Or an open marriage. And it's showing that, Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau are now political allies. He didn't, he didn't fulfill any of the promises he got elected on. He didn't fight the carbon tax. He gave in court. Even the carbon tax going up. Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan are putting up a fruitless effort to stop the carbon tax, but Doug Ford isn't even going along with it. He's blown out the spending. He didn't take away the windmills or the green energy contracts that he promised to get into. He didn't repeal the radical sex ed. He got elected. The only reason he won the leadership race is because he got, Charles McVitie and his crew to back him by promising to repeal radical sex ed. And it's insane. So
Well, the thing is too, like, yeah, he even would pretend like he was actually making progress on it while basically giving the Liberals and the NDP every single thing they wanted. So when they passed the new sex ed curriculum, and I think Belinda Carahalios told this on our last podcast, but when you skimmed through the new sex ed curriculum that was supposedly getting rid of all the kind of like oddly groomerish stuff in it, you could like just Command K, so like, searching words on it, and to try and find any text that was different. If you just copy pasted the old one over top of it, there was maybe a few words that had been changed, but single egregious thing in the sex ed curriculum was completely left in. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing different about it. And I think it really is like Doug Ford doesn't really care about the Canadian federal government at all. So he basically will make deals with whoever's in power in order to keep his position as premier.
Yeah, this is absolutely right. How is that? It's nearly impossible to spend more than Kathleen Wynne did. I thought it would be impossible. Like, I don't think I could do it. Like, I'd have to write down and like, I'd have to like every day I'd have to get like import black truffles from Spain to put on like caviar and top it with like lobster and Kobe beef. And I still don't think I could spend more than Kathleen Wynne if I mandated that was the meal everyone had to eat for all of Ontario and I'll pay for it. But somehow Doug Ford has managed to spend. And I was saying this, like when Doug Ford, this is even before COVID. The massive spending is even before COVID. It'd be one thing if he had curbed spending and then during COVID blew it out and you go, okay, the COVID stuff, pandemic. It'd be one thing if he like built 17 hospitals across Ontario to handle the influx of COVID patients. But no, he did not. He just the province was broke before he got in, and then he somehow increased spending. It's insane. And then this I assume, Dina, this is in reference to Ontario schools.
That's Bill 67, of course. Yeah, and the funny thing is that the PCs didn't even propose Bill C-67. The whole basically you could just call it this like CRT in schools bill. It's like it's like racial equity in the education system or whatever. And if anyone ever uses the term equity in a positive light, run screaming, because equity that's basically just communism. It's that everything must be equal between people.
James Lindsay has a great term. He calls it race Marxism, which is what it is.
100%. No, critical theory is a Marxist theory, regardless if it's critical race theory or critical gender theory or anything. It's essentially the process of taking any institution that's not Marxist and trying to break it down into oppressor-oppressed relationships. Whereas, it's the economy. Well, you don't make as much as that other person, ergo you're oppressed by that person because they have more property and more wealth than you, and they're like lording it over you. They're somehow exploited you. And then with critical race theory, it's that, well, you see there's a disparity between white people and black people and Asian people and black people and Indian people and white people or whatever. And then saying, well, we're different classes and ergo things need to be corrected because these sort of vague groups aren't exactly equal in terms of outcome. Not that everyone was given equal opportunity. And even then, the outcomes can usually be explained by a lot of different factors. It's a univariate analysis, which is the stupidest way of doing anything, is finding one factor and saying that it must be that reason, or because of that must be factor into the reason why these like groups are not the same. And it's what you would call racism of the gaps argument, where if you find a gap where there's a disparity, you just fill it with racism and you assume it's racism.
Yeah, and the best way to explain it is race Marxism is everyone is familiar with the paradigm of the Marxists would say it's the proletariat, the working class against the bourgeoisie, the elites. Even though like anyone who owned property, like a carpenter is actually bourgeoisie according to like Lenin and whatever. But like the way you would just take critical race theory is Marxism was proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And what it simply does is critical race theory is it says, well, they're socialists, so they hate the working class. So they just instituted black and bourgeoisie for white. So they take the Marxist principles and they take out the failed economic theory of Marxism and just replace it with failed racial theory. So that's how you get critical race theory. And that's what
critical theory. Critical theory was literally invented by people who had communists who had fled Germany and Austria and whatnot in the 30s, and rightfully so, because the Nazis were around, and it was a lot of Jewish and communist intellectuals who left. But they went to America and found out that this whole labor versus the capitalist thing didn't really work because people were actually quite wealthy and doing fine and they were happy with their lives. So critical theory was a way of sort of you taking Marxism, the whole labor versus capitalism element, and turning it into oppressor and oppressed based on cultural based on sort of cultural aspects as well. It's like cultural Marxism is another good way of putting it.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back to the topic of hand of critical race theory. Also, wait, we should do a commercial. This episode of the National Telegraph and TNT Live is brought to you by the National Telegraph ourselves. So next week, we are going down to Bitcoin Miami to cover the conference there. It is rather expensive, but we do want to really expand the paper. If you noticed, we've started a Bitcoin and finance section on our website because with the dictatorship and Justin Trudeau going on, I was again on the ground in Ottawa, and I saw that despite what the government did and how many dictatorial powers it employs, it couldn't stop Bitcoin from getting through to the truckers. So we want to go down there and learn a lot more about how this thing operates. Teach you guys, how to properly, if you do invest in Bitcoin or anything, how to keep your money safe. What you need in terms of a hot wallet, a cold wallet, all that different type of stuff.
Or even just if you're interested in Bitcoin in general, even if you don't want to specifically invest in it, why it's important and why it's just important to be fighting people trying to regulate Bitcoin to death.
And if you just like the National Telegraph and you want us to go down to Florida and do more content there, we'll be doing some American content, a lot of podcasts. We want to sort of upgrade our equipment so we can do more of these at higher quality. So more content, more frequent, more deep state fighting. So if you want to support the National Telegraph, just $2, $5, anything, would really help us out. We super appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And let's get back to the topic at hand. The Justin Trudeau. Okay. Is everyone. The glorious leader, Justin Trudeau, is proposing many great things, like less freedom of speech, because the only way to get more freedom of speech is to censor the internet. That is the plan from Justin Trudeau's heritage minister, yeah? So I love this thing. Justin Trudeau is the only person who could have a heritage minister. And the point of the heritage minister is to raise the Canadian heritage, okay? So anything we find a little bit racist, we will take it away, because it is bad, and we do not want it. That's the type of thing. Okay. So you have the heritage minister whose job he feels is like to erase Canadian heritage that he doesn't like. So the first heritage minister to do this was Stephen Gabilblio. Again, I refuse to get his name right. So Stephen Gabilblio. Gabilbliot first pushed this through. And the new anti-heritage minister, Pablo Rodriguez, is doubling down on all of this insanity. We also had this week Melanie Joly, famous for building an $8 million hockey rink that no one was allowed to skate on. She's now foreign affairs minister, somehow incompetenced her way into an important position. And she thinks it's within her mandate to censor the internet. This is how we're going to fight Putin, guys. We're going to turn Canada into, we're going to become more like Vladimir Putin to stop Vladimir Putin. Because the one way that everyone knows, the way Vladimir Putin was able to invade the Ukraine was by mean Facebook posts in Canada. That's how we did it. It's because people were spreading disinformation on the internet. That's Russia's number one weapon. Never mind artillery and tanks. It's disinformation. So every minister in Trudeau's government thinks it is their sworn duty to take away your freedoms or censor the internet. It's absolutely bonkers bananas. And if you're wondering what is within the mandate of the Foreign Affairs Department, it's to promote Canadian values abroad. That's what they're supposed to do. But no, they are. So
I'm blown away by the convenience in this universe where everything seems to always point back to censorship and everything the Liberals already wanted to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, turns out everything in the world is proof that our agenda needs to be enacted. You will eat the bugs and you will be happy.
It 100%. It's like a sort to move to inflation, but it's like we're experiencing inflation, and the first thing politicians do to solve the inflation is to print more money and hand more money out. There is no idea that a politician will not double down on. It's like it's actually a fantastic book if you can ever find it. It's Thomas Sowell's book, Visions of the Anointed, because all these people who are self-appointed experts, every time their plan fails, it's because the plan wasn't big enough or because people are stupid and they didn't follow it correctly. So with inflation, it's like, oh, I can't believe us printing money has caused the currency to devalue, which requires prices to go up. They're like, well, we must have not printed enough money and redistributed enough. That's the problem here. Or it's that people aren't using their money correctly, so we have to pass laws to make them spend their money better.
Yeah, that's the other thing is we should probably talk about this. Is there is a sort of global dictatorship coming around, and you can I think we are a bit more maybe salient and realistic on what the World Economic Forum is. We know it's evil. We just we might disagree on if it's hard, if it we're sort of it's a conspiracy of 1,000 fools rather than one competent master.
It's also just clowns in general.
I think everyone at the World Economic Forum is a moron. I think they're all morons. The problem is we have a very stupid culture, and they control the media and Disney and the information streams. So they're able to propose their stupid plans as something halfway smart. And I think a lot of people here might think, oh no, Klaus Schwab is a genius. He is not a genius. He's a fucking moron.
Yeah, people think of him, even though they oppose him, they'll think of him as like, he's evil, but he's just so smart and he's able to put these plans together. Like, no. He's been just running a stupid economics club since the 70s that politicians kind of attend and go to because it gives them this kind of unearned credibility because I was at the World Economic Forum, even though it's a bunch of random economic fascists just talking about failed ideas. It has that sort of pizzazz in the name. But yeah, like when someone comes up with something called Project Syndicate, it's probably not a particularly good idea or a particularly competent idea. He's stupid enough to name something Project Syndicate while dressing up like a Ninja Turtle. He's not a particularly intelligent man. What was that? What was that pronunciation? Particularly, whatever.
Listen, so Klaus Schwab, everyone, you will eat the bugs and you'll be happy, okay? You'll own nothing. There'll be no private property. You'll eat the bugs, okay?
Get in the pod, yeah.
If you like the video right now, please like the video and you'll get a free delivery of bugs, okay? We get bugs straight to your house. You get a full week supply of bugs, okay?
The barbecue flavor.
The barbecue flavor bugs. No, barbecue flavor will encourage people to eat more meat. It is actually soy flavored bugs, okay?
You're not allowed to eat beef. It's your favorite forbidden fruit and you're not allowed to have it.
We will now rename anyone. Alberta will now be called Poland again. We will call it, Portland. It is Portland 2.0. Alberta is now illegal. It is now more Portland, okay? That's
That reminds me of when Notley was first elected in 2015 and all the radio shows were doing these fantastic segments they're like welcome to the I'm sounding like German. I don't want to do a Russian accent, but they were doing all the welcome to Alberta stands type of stuff, and it's great.
I will do Russian accent for you, okay? This Alberta. It is great country, great place, except it have too much freedom, okay? We make it Soviet country, Alberta, okay? Everyone listen to great leader, okay? This is great times. You get one piece of bread once a week, it's okay. My grandmother, she feed entire family, one potato, 2 months. Great woman. And that is the NDP. So we kind of lost the point I was going to make, but we're actually staring down the spectrum or the barrel of the gun of a global dictatorship or a globalist dictatorship, which would be enforced as sort of a technocratic dictatorship. The real threat of globalism is really this global technocracy where we sort of parse out and delegate experts who all went to the same schools and the same leftist brainwashing to sort of centralized policy.
It's infectiously bad ideas to the point where even though you can move, where are you going to move? Because everyone has the same bad ideas in every country because everyone is, and then this is where my thing is with a lot of these like sort of internationalist or globalist type policies. It's just that they're very dumb, but they sound very good. So a lot of politicians buy into them. I think a lot of them even know they're bad, but politicians are naturally extremely lazy outside of getting elected. And they'll go for these things that sound good and get them elected. It's not because they're meeting in it's not because they're meeting in a big circular room and telling each other what the plan is. It's just that they're very lazy and the World Economic Forum basically hands them policy platforms.
They're lazy morons. But to the global dictatorship that we're staring down the barrel of, it's sort of backed by the central bank digital currencies, CBDCs as they're being called, and this is the real threat. And this is kind of where I'm like, they actually might have sort of a plan here. So I don't really think like they've planned this for years and years and years. But what they are capable of sometimes doing is reading the tea leaves of where things are going. Some of them are smart enough to see that, all our stupid policies are going to create a kaboom. And, you do have people at BlackRock who I don't think are that stupid. They're making tens of millions of dollars a year, but they know that if the economy goes kaboom, they can put themselves in a position to cha-ching. And, one of the big ways that they can do that is these CBDCs, these central bank digital currencies. And what these really represent is the death of freedom. Like, if central bank digital currencies get instituted, this is like the beginning of the sci-fi dystopia, because there's a huge difference between what you say cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and CBDCs, which are fiat currencies that are digitized. Because Bitcoin is totally decentralized, no one controls it, no one can.
And the acronym CBDC literally stands for centralized bank digital currency, central bank digital currency. So the whole point is that the government could just go to your account and say, no, this person's not allowed to receive any deposits or withdrawals anymore, and they're not allowed to access their money. Whereas the thing with Bitcoin is it's decentralized, and your money's kept safe from basically everyone's mutual interest in ensuring the integrity of the blockchain, which is basically just a transaction history, just making sure everything is done right. That's your Bitcoin's only worth money because no one else is worth money. It's not because, I want mine, but that guy shouldn't have his.
CBDCs will they use CBDCs to coerce people to get microchipped? And the answer is, if they institute CBDCs, you don't need a microchip. Like the microchip, okay, maybe in 100 years or something when they can do more things there. But listen, you all have a tracking device on you right now. And if CBDCs are instituted, they can literally track all your purchases with an algorithm, and they can already know everything about you. A microchip would be redundant, but they can coerce you to do almost anything with the central bank digital currency. So one of the things they're talking about right now is ESG scores. And if you don't know what ESG scores are, you need to start looking into this, because this is the Canadian government, the Canadian banks, the Canadian media has already started pushing ESG. So ESG scores stand for environment, E. S is social justice. G is governance. So your ESG score is like a Western version of a social credit system that China has. And the higher your ESG score, the more of a discount you would get on things. So let's say you're a great person. You're the best, guys. You put solar panels on your house. So your E score goes up. You get a electric car. You put solar panels on your house. You buy Greta Thunberg's new book. Your E score goes up. Great. Social justice. You go out on the streets, you scream death to Israel, you support Palestinian terrorism, good for you. You support Black Lives Matter, you join Antifa. Your S score goes up. You talk about diversity in the thing. Well, BL, let's just see who has a lower ESG score. But I admire. Oh, we both put it up at the same time.
Yeah, we both knew that comment was great.
We both saw this one. TL, I'll eat meat and I will detonate.
I just like that Zor Cuckbird's doing it at the same time. Cuckburger. You're committing so many sins in chat.
You know what, BL? Yes. So, but BL, he gets it, right? You eat meat, right? So what they can do is, if you have an ESG score and it gets low enough, well, they can coerce you into saying, okay, your daily quotient, your weekly quotient of meat has been reached. You can't have more than 4 meals of meat in a week because it will violate your E cap.
I would say that the more realistic thing is more so, you buy a lot of meat, well, your credit score goes down, because we don't really want to be lending money to someone like you. And it's something like that where you can maybe live how you want, but if you kind of want to, progress in life, you want a house, like you want to actually move up in a house and you need a mortgage, well, you better be acting in a government-approved way or you're not getting it. Sort of like this slow-burning bureaucratic terrorism.
How far can the next ESG score asking for a friend? We will find out. Trust me, we will find out when they're instituted. But essentially, they can coerce you with a lot of different things. Like they can, through your credit score, like, well, if you want to get a loan on your house, or if you need to put your kids through college, or if you need money to do X, Y, or Z, they can coerce you into changing your habits. And with central bank digital currencies, right? Think of how the trucker protest went when they shut off, close people's bank accounts. Well, some people might have still had cash. Some people might have still had, money in Bitcoin or whatever and could have gotten around that with cash. Well, now when they shut off your bank account, it's a digital thing. They just need to push a button and there's literally nothing you can do to get around it. So you're completely at their mercy. Now, will they institute these powers? Who knows? I mean, they already have instituted it before this goes in. And this all ties back to the Justin Trudeau as a dictator question. So yeah, CBDCs are they're the beginning of the dystopia, and they are being talked about, and they are being pushed. And BlackRock and the World Economic Forum, all of that is going forward. No child policy. Like, if you have 3 kids, is that bad for you? Like, 2 kids is replacement rate.
And even then with like the no child policy thing, like even though whenever they put up like posters in like cities in Canada, the US, where it's like telling people not to have kids, like even people in like the sort of soft conservative media will freak out and say like, what the heck is wrong with this person? I guarantee those policies are unpopular. But the problem is that the people in government tend to be in the same club and they believe those crazy ideas are actually rational. And that's kind of always the problem with governments. It's not because the country went crazy. It's because the country doesn't really care that the people in government happen to have a bunch of crazy policies on top of the ones that sound about right.
Yeah, and that's the problem we're dealing with all these idiots. Oh, they're so stupid, and I hate them. Hate them all. The problem is more than Justin Trudeau. It's the entire radical left or hardline left or whatever you want to call it. Right
if you talk to anyone
who point out, guys, big congratulations. Pour one out there for Catherine McKenna. Catherine McKenna just got a job at the United Nations where she belongs. And she will be reviewing all the green policies there to make sure you're not greenwashing things. Now, Catherine McKenna, what are her policies? Well, she's misplaced more money than anyone has ever misplaced in Canada, which is a big accomplishment. So thank you, the United Nations, for taking Catherine McKenna off our hands. And oh God, Catherine McKenna is going to start annoying us from the United Nations. If the United Nations couldn't get any better or any worse, Catherine McKenna, we salute you.
Everyone buy a single of Imagine for Catherine McKenna. Or whatever else. I don't even know what an internationalist tradition is. Yeah,
I mean, I'm so excited to be, now the entire world will be lectured to by Catherine McKenna, not just Canada. So people in Australia, the Middle East, our American friends, you now get to have vapid lectures on the climate from Catherine. Doggies taste good, McKenna.
The Climate Barbie nickname is going to be amazing going forward because you know that the American media will not hold back on using it all the time once they find out about her.
Mm-hmm.
And once they find out about her eating a dog, that's going to be amazing. I already know that there's going to be a Tucker Carlson episode all about her.
You kind of wish that Tucker Carlson would have like more Canadian contacts, so we could just be like, hey Tucker, here's all the crazy things that like you can just. Because Tucker does a great thing where he's like. And then the Liberals just said you're a bad person, but they ate dogs. Does it sound like a person you want telling you what you can do? I don't know.
There's this guy on Twitter. I actually go find the video again. He does the perfect Tucker Carlson impression. He's like, and she ate a dog. And while dogs are delicious, well, we don't exactly want people eating our favorite pooch. It just doesn't do well. I don't know.
It's pretty good.
He does a great. I'm just going off this other guy I saw on Twitter just talking about Tucker Carlson going to like whatever it is, like Chipotle for like lunch. It's amazing. But yeah, like honestly, that's kind of our mission when we go to the US is kind of convince people and talk to other kind of conservative influencers from the US and say, you gotta talk more about Canada. People don't realize how weird Canada is. And like every once in a while, all of America will focus on Portland or San Francisco because they're completely unhinged. You could do the same thing with Canada, but you would report on it every single day because there are as many Portlands in Canada and every single one of them is doing a new stupid policy. The Americans should talk about if they don't want it jumping the border. Every terrible policy in San Francisco and Portland was first done in Canada, maybe in a slightly milder form. But we tend to be, we don't exactly have people jumping the border, but we have a lot of policies jumping the border.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, our people, I mean, they need to build an ideological wall around Canada. Build up a wall of ideas on the northern border. Physical wall in the south and an ideological wall in the north. Or else, you're just going to, it's going to be straight communist nonsense there down there. So is there
Maybe if
anything
you
else
want
we cover
I
on
was gonna say maybe to wrap up the episode. I remember like way back at the start of the stream, someone, and I want to see if I can even get back to it. Someone was asking us about how many people are now in the Conservative Party leadership race. There we
I
go.
remember saying that. Yeah. We're now. Okay, what are we at?
Legitimately, I think it's like 10. I think it actually might be
we're
10 at this
now,
point.
which fits my sort of prediction of you'll need at least 10 for the Patrick Brown John Charest pact to be. So you got Patrick Brown and John Charest, who actually, despite what you think, are actually two different people, even though they are the same person. Then you got Pierre Poilievre, Leslyn Lewis, Scott Atchison is his name.
Atchison, yeah, you're right.
Follow him under who the hell cares. Roman Baber, Leah Aslov jumped in the race, correct?
Mark Dalton.
You
were correct about Aslov.
Aslov is in. Okay.
The weird guy from Saskatchewan with just the weirdo from Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Who else? It's 8 I can name.
There's another obscure MP who jumped in the race today. Let's just call them Who Gives a Crap. And then there's also something or call it.
The fascinating one is Leah Aslov. Like, what kind of the chutzpah of this woman to run for leader? She crossed the floor from the Liberals, which good on her. When she went crazy, she crossed the floor from the Liberals. But what type of chutzpah does it take from a lady to say, you know what? I ran as a Liberal, and 5 years ago, I was a Liberal. I was voting for carbon taxes. I was voting for, abortion rights for trans women, even though they can't get pregnant. But, that's all men, 5 years ago, I was on team men can get pregnant too. And now, I crossed the floor. So I feel like I can run the party.
There is like, okay, you know what? I'm offended because I am very, very much on the Aslov train. But here, I'm going to make the actual pitch for Leah Aslov and why she's better than Jean Charest or John Brown and Patrick Charest or Patrick Brown and John Charest or Patrick O'Toole. I don't know which one is which. At least she can say, hey, guys, I've improved over the last 3 years. I went from a crazy nutcase to slightly less of a crazy nutcase. So I'm technically moving to the right while Patrick Brown and Jean Charest are like consistently moving to the left. Legitimately, I would vote for her before Patrick Brown or whatever, because at least she'd probably get voted out by caucus within 5 seconds. Oh, and I just wanted to highlight this. Someone finally noticed. Yeah, I was literally called Dwight throughout all of high school. And I literally, for my high school graduation, just shot a parody version of The Office for our class. And it's amazing. Maybe I'll show you guys one day.
Yeah. If this video gets 1,000 likes, and if we hit the fundraiser goal, Wyatt will release. That's a great way to think. If we hit the fundraising goal to help support, TNT, we will release Wyatt's high school office parody as him as Dwight Schrute from The Office.
Yeah. I literally shot it so that all the insert shot, because I did there's a whole 22-minute thing, but I just released the whole intro to it because it gets really boring after that. But the intro is literally shot for shot the exact same thing to the music, and it's great. Denna was mentioning Joseph Borgalt. He's the guy from Saskatchewan running. And again, I don't like the WEF. I don't like the UN. Daniel doesn't either. But the thing is that he literally makes every single thing he talks about the WEF and whatnot. And that's always just the thing that really sets alarm bells off in my head, is if you constantly think the WEF is the biggest issue in the world, it kind of makes me think you probably aren't grounded on politics in general. And what I've seen from him is a little odd, to put it mildly.
Who's this?
Joseph Borgalt. He's like the random guy from Saskatchewan who's running.
Okay. I haven't seen anything from him. I guess he's just never made it onto my radar. But yeah, show me, that's the thing.
He runs something called Canadians for Truth. And it's kind of one of those things where it's very much I'm not that I like to use the term conspiracy theorist to just brush people aside, but it's a little bit of we're talking about the WEF being bad, and then we go into the territory where we're just going to randomly tie bad things that happen in Canada to the WEF. I'm against them, but they're not that powerful.
This is my problem when people make the WEF seem smarter and more powerful than it is, which ends up feeding into the WEF's motif. And that's one of the reasons why they're able to be so fucking stupid and get away with it, is because people overestimate their capabilities. Like I would mandate, I wouldn't, but if I was leader of the Conservative Party, I would mandate that everyone make fun of the WEF all the time. As we're going up to an hour, this is something that I came up with in Ottawa when I was covering the truckers. I was talking to some friends. It was a late at night, have a few drinks. And so like, how do we handle the WEF and what would you do? And I came up with this, like, this would be my plan if I was Prime Minister of Canada dealing with the World Economic Forum. I wouldn't boycott the World Economic Forum, because then that would just play into this, he thinks there's this crazy shadowy group, blah, blah, blah. It would just play into their narrative, right? And make them seem like all this thing. I would go to the WEF and I would bring as my cabinet like 10 of the funniest truckers I could find, right? And then day one, we come in, they're just in plaid or whatever, driving in trucks, and we come into the World Economic Forum and we just heckle. We heckle everything at the World Economic Forum, okay? So if we get kicked out, even better. So we get kicked out for heckling, but not like, you're killing everyone. Like, no, seriously, funny heckling. This is why I want the funniest truckers I can find who get it. Like, we're just going to be hilarious and we're going to make fun of them. We're going to heckle them at their own event. That's day one. Day two, after the media lights themselves in flames in just, how dare he disrespect the World Economic Forum at Davos? It's the greatest place ever. Day two, we come in and I apologize. I, as Prime Minister, would get carried in at a palanquin, like by all the truckers, who would then be dressed as like slaves in like loincloths or whatever. And they would carry me in and I'd be dressed in a robe and a crown, just like the one Klaus Schwab wore, with a scepter. And then I'd get off of it and I'd have them like do the thing like Xerxes, where I like step on their backs. And then I would tip them in bugs. I'd be like, oh, some bugs for you, bugs for you. Then I'd start throwing bugs out to the crowd of all the plebs around and the media, being like, and then I'd apologize for giving the serfs a voice, and then take it so overly seriously, well dressed as Klaus Schwab in a robe, that I like, because this is how I think you have to handle them, is just show that it's a ridiculous organization. And I think that was my plan I came up with the help.
It'd be great too. You're also using their exact talking points while you're on stage. So if someone's like, he made a fool of us, this was just a bunch of ridiculous nonsense he was saying on stage, and then the media has to realize that you're literally just quoting Klaus Schwab the entire time.
Yeah, and just I would take their policies and like pat them on the head. Don't worry, pleb, you will own nothing one day, right? Use it, like make fun of them with their own policies. So they have to call me a crazy person for saying all of this. But then the next time the World Economic Forum people say these things, they're saying the exact thing. Like, again, it's so stupid. You can just be them and it's a self-parody.
Feed people food cubes like you're it's Catholic communion. They have to walk up to you and get a paprika cross on their head.
Would I shave my head for the role? No, because the whole point is I'm not actually being Klaus Schwab, but I would imply. And people also don't take bald people as seriously as they do people with hair. So you got to do it. But no, I would not be bald. I'd just be dressed in the same robe he was, with a golden scepter and a crown.
Well, that's probably a great place to end.
What a great place to end. So yeah, that's my plan for the World Economic Forum. If you ever vote me as Prime Minister, and like, what would Daniel do at the World Economic Forum, I wonder? That's my plan. Now there's a German accent. Everyone, you will have some bugs and you will be happy, okay? Bugs for you and bugs for you. Mr. BL in the comment section, you get a bug, you get one whole grasshopper, okay? That is the thing. That is the fun. Everyone gets bugs. And we'll thank you for coming to the National Telegraph. Thank you to everyone who donates the money to the GoFundMe. Don't worry, because in a few years, no matter what you do, you owe nothing.
It's the Give, Send, Go.
The Give, Send, Go. So yes, the Give, Send, Go. The GoFundMe is a fascist, a liberal hellhole. We'll do the Give, Send, Go. It is a great place if you want to support the National Telegraph. And sincerely, we do thank everyone who supported us. I know it's hard to do the thank you in the German accent, but when we are talking about Justin Trudeau and Klaus Schwab, this is how you have to talk, because this is how they talk. And everyone knows that Justin Trudeau is a great warrior for freedom. That's why he takes the freedoms away. As you know, as you lose more freedoms, the country actually becomes freer. That is what we learned according to the Minister Pablo Rodriguez. So thank you very much. All right, so are we done? Okay, I guess then.
I thought you were just going to end it right there.
Yeah, I should end the broadcast there, but I thought, like, did Wyatt have anything to say? No. Okay,
I was just stunned.
Laila Tov.